Most gardens look incredible in June. Everything is blooming, everything is lush. And then August arrives, and that same garden looks sparse, tired, and honestly a little disappointing. Most people accept this as just the way gardens work. A few weeks of glory and then a long, slow decline into fall. But it does not have to work that way. There are perennials that do not peak in June and disappear. Plants that hit their stride in late summer and keep going. Plants still producing flowers in October when every other garden on the street has given up. And they come back every single year without replanting. We went deep. Bloom period records, real garden performance, every climate zone in America. One question. Which perennials actually keep blooming until frost? 10 made the list. Stick around because number 3 blooms twice in a single season if you know one simple trick that takes 30 seconds. And number 1 blooms continuously from late spring until hard frost. Through heat waves, through drought, through everything. Subscribe for this kind of practical garden knowledge every week. Let's get into it. Number 10. Veronica, the blue spike that opens the season. Most gardeners spend April staring at bare soil waiting for something to happen. Veronica is already happening. It is one of the earliest perennials to push up and one of the first to bloom, sending up dense spikes of violet-blue flowers in late spring that continue well into summer with deadheading. The color is distinctive, a true blue that most flowers cannot achieve, and it attracts pollinators from the moment the first spike opens. Hardy in zones 3 through 8, grows 12 to 18 inches tall. Full sun, well-drained soil, minimal maintenance. Cut the spent spikes back to the foliage and side shoots produce secondary blooms that extend the season significantly. Plant it at the front of a border where the vertical spike shape contrasts beautifully with mounded plants behind it. Number 9. Liatris, the native that feeds monarchs all season. Liatris does something unusual for a flowering perennial. Its blooms open from the top of the spike downward, which means the display extends over several weeks rather than peaking and finishing all at once. The color is vivid rosy purple, appearing in midsummer and persisting into fall on plants that ask almost nothing in return. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. Drought tolerant once established. Monarch butterflies and swallowtails treated as a primary nectar source during their late summer migration. Planted in groups of 3 or 5 for the kind of visual impact that single specimens never achieve. The seed heads that follow the flowers feed goldfinches through autumn. This plant earns its space 4 seasons out of 4. Number 8. Sedum autumn joy, the perennial that peaks when everything else is finishing. Most perennials are done by August. Sedum autumn joy is just getting started. Its flat top flower heads emerge in late summer as dusty pink, deepen to rose through September, and turn rich copper bronze by October, providing color and structure at exactly the moment most gardens are losing both. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. Drought tolerant, virtually pest-free. The thick succulent foliage is attractive from the moment it emerges in spring through the dried seed heads that persist into winter, giving birds something to forage and the garden something to look at when everything else has gone to ground. Planted in full sun and lean soil, too much fertility produces floppy stems. Give it the conditions it evolved for and it will reward you every September without fail. Number 7. Helenium, the autumn fire that burns brighter as summer fades. There is a moment in late July when most gardens begin to look tired. The spring performers are long finished. The summer stalwarts are starting to decline. And then helenium opens and the entire garden shifts into a different gear entirely. Helenium, commonly called sneezeweed despite having nothing to do with allergies, produces daisy-like flowers in shades that read like a sunset captured in petals. Deep burnt orange, mahogany red, golden yellow, and rich bronze, often with multiple colors, banding a single flower in combinations that look painted rather than grown. The flowers appear from midsummer and continue without interruption until hard frost ends the season, giving it one of the longest bloom periods of any perennial in this list. It grows in USDA zones 3 through 8, reaching 2 to 5 feet tall depending on variety, and performs best in full sun with consistently moist soil. Unlike many late-season perennials that tolerate dry conditions, helenium is one that rewards regular watering with significantly more flowers and stronger stems throughout its long blooming season. The practical tip that experienced gardeners use with helenium is called the Chelsea chop. In late May or early June, cut the plant back by 1/3. This delays flowering by 2 to 3 weeks, produces a shorter, more self-supporting plant, and results in significantly more flower stems than an unpruned specimen. Two plants, one chopped and one not, will give you staggered bloom times that extend the display from midsummer all the way through October. Bumblebees work helenium flowers systematically and exclusively in the morning when nectar production peaks. By afternoon, the bees have moved on, but the flowers remain, burning their autumn colors against the sky until the light fades. Plant it where the afternoon sun catches it from behind. The backlighting turns those petals translucent in a way that photographs cannot capture and that no other perennial in this color range produces. Number 6. Agastache, the fragrant spike that hummingbirds find before you do. You will know Agastache is blooming before you see it. The fragrance arrives first. Warm, herbal, somewhere between anise and mint, with a sweetness underneath that has no precise comparison in the scent vocabulary most people carry. It comes from the foliage, as much as the flowers, released whenever the wind moves through the plant or a hand brushes against a stem in passing. In a garden with Agastache in bloom, the air itself is different. Agastache funiculum, commonly called anise hyssop, produces tall, upright spikes of tubular flowers in shades of violet blue, purple, coral, and orange, depending on the variety. The spikes appear in midsummer and continue producing fresh flowers at their tips, while the lower portions develop attractive seed heads that extend the ornamental value of the plant well into autumn. Hummingbirds locate Agastache with a speed that suggests they were already looking for it. Sphinx moths arrive at dusk and hover at the flowers through the evening hours. It grows in USDA zones 5 through 9, and performs best in full sun with well-drained soil. It is one of the most drought-tolerant perennials on this list, a quality that makes it particularly valuable in the increasingly hot and dry summers that gardeners across the central and western United States are navigating. Once established, it asks for almost nothing and continues flowering from July through frost with a consistency that rewards planting it in prominent positions where its performance can be fully appreciated. The leaves are edible and make an exceptional herbal tea with a flavor that matches the fragrance exactly. Steep a handful of fresh leaves in hot water for 5 minutes. The resulting tea is calming, pleasantly sweet, and genuinely distinctive. A perennial that flowers for 4 months, feeds hummingbirds, fills the garden with fragrance, and produces leaves you can drink. There is not a square foot of garden space that would not be improved by having this plant in it. Number 5. Russian sage, the silver and blue cloud that never quits. Stand back from a mature Russian sage in full bloom and try to describe what you are seeing. The stems are silver white, almost luminous in certain light. The flowers are lavender blue, individually tiny but produced in such extraordinary abundance along every stem that the entire plant appears to float rather than grow. In a light breeze, it moves with a fluidity that makes it look less like a plant and more like something atmospheric. A piece of sky that took root in your garden and decided to stay. Perovskia atriplycifolia, now reclassified botanically as Salvia yangi but still universally sold as Russian sage, grows in USDA zones 4 through 9 and is one of the most heat and drought-tolerant perennials available to American gardeners. It grows 2 to 4 feet tall and equally wide, producing its silver stems and blue flower spikes from midsummer through hard frost, with a tirelessness that makes other long-blooming perennials seem intermittent by comparison. The fragrance of the foliage is strong, aromatic, and deeply pleasant when crushed between fingers. Deer and rabbits, two of the most persistent garden pests in residential landscapes, find it unappealing. This deer resistance alone makes Russian sage worth growing in the many parts of America where deer pressure makes gardening feel like a losing proposition. The visual combination of Russian sage with other late-season perennials is one of the most reliably beautiful things a garden can produce. Paired with the deep orange of helenium, the contrast is electric. Against the hot pink of liatris seed heads, it becomes romantic. Alongside the bronze seed heads of sedum, it achieves something that feels deliberately designed rather than simply planted. Cut it back hard in early spring, almost to the ground, and it returns each year with the same extraordinary performance. A perennial that looks like a painting, asks for almost nothing, and blooms from July until November. Plant it where you can see it from inside the house on a gray October afternoon when the light is flat and everything else has given up. Russian sage will still be blue. 4. Coreopsis, the sunshine that refuses to stop. There is a particular quality of yellow that Coreopsis produces that no other perennial quite matches. Not the cold lemon yellow of some flowers, not the muddy yellow of others. A warm, saturated, almost glowing yellow that looks like distilled summer sunshine held in a 2-inch daisy-shaped flower. And the extraordinary thing about Coreopsis is not the color itself, but the relentlessness with which it produces it. From June until frost, this plant is in bloom. Not intermittently, not in flushes with gaps between. Continuously, flower after flower, replacing spent blooms with fresh ones so consistently that the plant never appears to rest. Coreopsis grandiflora and its many cultivars are hardy in USDA zones 4 through 9 and grow 12 to 24 inches tall depending on variety. They perform best in full sun and well-drained soil and are among the most drought-tolerant perennials on this entire list. Once established, they thrive in the kind of hot, dry conditions that stress most flowering plants into dormancy. Poor soil does not discourage them. Heat does not slow them. They simply keep producing flowers with a cheerfulness that feels almost deliberate. Deadheading spent blooms prolongs the flowering season and keeps the plant looking tidy through the summer months. But even without deadheading, modern compact varieties like Sunray and Early Sunrise continue blooming with enough vigor to remain ornamentally valuable through the entire season. Cut the whole plant back by 1/3 in midsummer if it begins to look leggy, and it will return with fresh basal growth and a second flush of flowers that carries through October. The practical value of Coreopsis in a mixed perennial border goes beyond its own bloom period. Its fine texture and bright color make neighboring plants appear more dramatic by contrast. The deep purple of catmint looks richer alongside Coreopsis yellow. The blue spikes of Veronica appear more intense. This is a plant that makes everything around it look better while simultaneously performing better than most of what surrounds it. Pollinators treat Coreopsis as a primary resource from the moment the first flowers open. Bees cover the blooms on warm mornings in numbers that speak to the quality of the nectar. Goldfinches arrive in late summer when the seed heads begin forming and return daily until the seeds are exhausted. A perennial that blooms from June to frost, tolerates drought and poor soil, improves its neighbors, and feeds both pollinators and birds. Plant it in groups of 3 or more and give it full sun. It will give you summer back every single year. Number 3. Catmint, the purple haze that covers itself in flowers twice. Walk through any well-designed perennial garden in late May, and you will find catmint. It is the plant spilling softly over path edges, mounding at the front of borders, filling the spaces between more upright plants with a loose, relaxed quality that makes the whole composition feel natural rather than arranged. The lavender-blue flower spikes appear in late spring in such abundance that the gray-green foliage beneath them becomes almost invisible. The effect is of a low purple cloud hovering at ground level, humming with bees from morning until evening. Nepeta X Faceni is hardy in USDA zones 3 through 8 and grows 12 to 24 inches tall and equally wide, making it one of the most useful front-of-border perennials for filling space quickly and maintaining that space without constant management. It grows in full sun to partial shade, tolerates dry conditions once established, and is completely ignored by deer and rabbits, a combination of qualities that makes it genuinely indispensable in gardens where those pressures exist. Here is the management technique that turns a good catmint planting into a great one. After the first flush of bloom finishes in June, cut the entire plant back by half with a pair of head shears. This takes 30 seconds per plant. Within 3 to 4 weeks, new growth emerges and a second flush of flowers begins, often as abundant as the first, that continues from midsummer through September. Without this shearing, the plant produces a sparse secondary bloom. With it, the rebloom is spectacular. The fragrance of the foliage is aromatic and pleasant to humans and genuinely intoxicating to cats, which accounts for the common name. Bees treat catmint as one of their most reliable nectar sources through the entire bloom period. On a warm morning in June, a large planting of catmint in full flower is audibly buzzing from several feet away. That sound is one of the most reassuring things a garden can produce. It means the ecosystem is working. It means the garden is alive in a way that goes beyond appearance. Plant it at the edge of a path where people will brush against it as they pass and release the fragrance from the foliage. Plant it between roses where it fills the bare lower stems with color and deters aphids with its aromatic oils. Plant it anywhere you need something that looks beautiful from May through September with almost no effort and returns every year more established and more floriferous than the year before. Here. Number 2. Reblooming daylily, the perennial that learned a new trick. The original daylily, the orange roadside variety that spreads along highways and colonizes ditches across America, blooms for 3 weeks in July and then spends the rest of the season as a clump of strappy foliage. Beautiful during those 3 weeks, invisible for the other 49. For a long time, that was simply the nature of daylilies, and gardeners accepted it as the price of the spectacular flower. Then breeders spent decades developing something different, reblooming daylilies, varieties specifically selected and hybridized for their ability to produce multiple flushes of bloom from early summer through frost, changed the calculation entirely. The same extraordinary flower, available in thousands of colors and forms from pale cream through deep burgundy to near black, now performing not for 3 weeks but for 4 to 5 months with consistent flowering that makes it one of the longest blooming perennials available. Hemerocallis, reblooming varieties are hardy in USDA zones 3 through 9 and grow 18 to 30 inches tall. They perform best in full sun with consistent moisture during their active growing and blooming periods, though they tolerate partial shade and periodic drought with more resilience than most perennials. Each individual flower lasts only 1 day, which is the origin of the botanical name, but each scape carries multiple buds that open in succession, and each plant produces multiple scapes through the season, creating a continuous display rather than a single event. The varieties that consistently deliver on the red bloom promise include Happy Returns, a clear yellow that blooms from June through frost with almost no gaps, Stella de Oro, the most widely planted rebloomer in America, and Rosy Returns, a deep rose pink that performs with the same tireless consistency. Plant these specific varieties rather than generic daylily mixes if reliable rebloom is your goal. Divide established clumps every 3 to 4 years in early spring or fall. Daylilies that have been in the ground for many years without division produce smaller flowers and reduced bloom count as the clump becomes overcrowded. Division restores vigor immediately and gives you additional plants to extend the planting or share with neighbors who will inevitably ask what is blooming so reliably in your garden from June through October. Number 1. Gaillardia, the blanket flower that blooms like it has something to prove. We end here with the plant that closes this list because it embodies everything this list has been building toward. A perennial that blooms from the moment warm weather arrives until hard frost physically stops it, that thrives in the conditions that end other flowers, that produces bloom so vivid, so saturated with color, so relentlessly cheerful that a single plant in full flower can change the mood of an entire garden. Gaillardia X grandiflora, the hybrid blanket flower, produces daisy-shaped blooms in combinations of deep red, burnt orange, and brilliant yellow that look like someone applied color with intention rather than allowing it to occur naturally. The petals are tipped and banded in patterns that vary between varieties, each one different, each one extraordinary, radiating outward from a central dome that itself transitions from burgundy to orange to yellow as the flower matures. These are not subtle flowers. They are emphatic ones. They are hardy in USDA zones 3 through 10, making Gaillardia one of the most widely adaptable perennials on this entire list. They grow 12 to 24 inches tall and perform best in full sun with well-drained, even poor soil. This is the critical insight that most people miss with Gaillardia. Rich, fertile, consistently moist soil produces lush foliage and shortened lifespan. Lean, dry, well-drained soil produces the exact conditions this plant evolved in and rewards that correctly matched environment with the most extraordinary bloom production of any perennial in its flowering season. Deadheads spent flowers regularly, and Gaillardia responds by producing replacement blooms within days. Stop deadheading in September and allow the seed heads to develop. They are ornamental in their own right and self-seed into the surrounding area, producing new plants that will bloom in their second year. A planting of Gaillardia that has been established for several years and allowed to self-seed expands naturally into a colony that covers more ground and produces more flowers each season than the original planting. The bloom season begins in late spring and does not end until frost kills the plant to the ground. Not a shortened season in heat, not a gap in midsummer when other perennials take a break. Continuous flowering from May or June until October or November, depending on your zone, through heat waves and drought and the kind of summer weather that sends less determined plants into early dormancy. This is the perennial that blooms like it has something to prove, and every year, from the moment the first flower opens in late spring to the moment frost finally ends the season, it proves it completely. Bonus tip. Before you plant anything, fix the soil first. Fence-line soil is almost always the worst soil in your yard. Compacted, dry, depleted from years of neglect. You can plant the best perennial on this list into bad fence-line soil and watch it struggle for years. Dig a trench, 18 inches deep, Fill it back with equal parts topsoil and compost. That is the entire secret. 2 hours of work before you plant creates the growing environment that makes everything above ground possible. Water deeply and infrequently. Deep watering builds deep roots. Deep roots survive drought, heat, and everything summer throws at them. Mulch 3 to 4 inches over the root zone and let it do the rest. Fix the soil once. These perennials will reward you for decades. 10 perennials, 0 replanting, and a garden that keeps performing long after everyone else's has given up. Pick one plant from this list today. Just one. The one that matched your zone, your space, your style. Plant it this season and watch what it does by October. Drop a comment and tell me which one you were starting with. I read every single one. Now, if you love these plants and you want to take your fence even further, I put together a complete video on the 20 best climbing plants that will completely cover and transform your fence line. Fast-growing, season-long, stunning results. Every climate zone covered. Click right here to watch it. You will not want to miss what number 1 does in a single season. Subscribe for more every week. See you in the next one.